Okay, good morning everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And first of all, welcome to the local food webinar. My name's Mick McGrath. I work for an organisation called Locality, and one of the reasons we got involved with this is because we quite regularly come across groups who are looking to set up enterprises around local food. But anyway, before I do that, in order to help us progress and develop and make sure this webinar provides you with the information you need, the first thing we'd like to do is to do a poll. So Noel, would you mind putting the first poll up just so I can then explain to people what we want them to do? So in terms of the question really is about what sections of the webinar you're most interested in. Hopefully you've all had a chance to tick the boxes. It looks as though you have. We were asking whether you're particularly interested in food production, food distribution, online presence. I think we've pretty much got a good split between all three, which is good. That means then that Nick, I think you pretty much go as you were really. The preference seems to be to hear everything which you planning to do, but obviously with a greater emphasis on the food distribution. So hopefully, Nick, that helps you in terms of planning the rest of the webinar. Okay, I'll move on quickly from that to the next point, which is why we're here. We're here because we know increasingly that an awful lot of communities see the idea of local food growing as really, really important. There continues to be lots of interest in the direct benefits of growing and eating healthy food, such as reducing air miles, the sharing economy, linked to well-being. But there's also an awful lot of good numbers of indirect benefits related to the local food growing ideas as well, such as bringing communities together and improving pride of place, lots and lots and lots of reasons. I'm going to briefly talk through some organisations who are already active and signposting to a range of organisations. I'm also going to then just talk you through some examples of some of the resources, good practice, case studies, templates, evidence reports, demonstrating impact, developing enterprise, income generation, and so on, kinds of approaches going on out there. Right, and this is the agenda, sorry, I will just to make sure I recap. So yes, this is an interactive session. It's with polls and pauses for questions. Hopefully you'll be able to see in the box that you would have, you will have a question box. If you could put questions in as we go along, I will then make sure they're read out to Nick and summarised down so we can quickly go through those and I'll read those out. Again, one of the reasons we're here doing this is to do with a program called Bright Ideas Fund, which the money comes from Power to Change, which in turn their money comes from Big Lottery Fund. It's all about developing community business ideas, and we saw through the first number of projects coming through that there were a number of community-based organisations who had strong food growing elements. So we thought it'd be useful to put a webinar together to sort of share some of the learning findings and so forth. As I mentioned before, it's clear there's lots of activities and networks going on, and I'm sure you've got your own stories to tell in terms of things you're involved with. But the main part of the presentation is really going to cover food production, community supported agriculture, food distribution, and community food hubs through the Open Food Network. Which is what Nick is going to talk about, and hopefully Nick is known to many of you. Okay, so let's move on to Growing Together. Growing Together is a new partnership initiative of community and environmental sector organisations that are really looking to unlock income potential, land and skills for community growing groups, with a focus on them becoming financially self-sustaining. This is obviously a huge issue, challenge for an awful lot of groups, how to make yourself viable and self-sustaining, and particularly in this climate where there's less and less funding and so forth. So this is certainly one of the things we're going to sort of focus on very much, because obviously it's relatively easy, he said, in sort of although I appreciate it's not to get some funding to set yourself up, but then it's the challenge is about how you develop, sustain and grow your model. So Growing Together provides a range of direct advice and support services to community growing groups, as well as signposting resources, awareness raising and strategic leadership. Funny enough, they're currently funded by the Big Lottery Fund as well at the moment. And Growing Together is a UK partnership of community and environmental organisations, which includes Federation of City Farms and Community Gardens, Groundwork UK, Plunkett Foundation, Incredible Edible Network, Permaculture Association, Development Trust Association Scotland, Wales Cooperative Centre, and Cooperative Alternatives Northern Ireland. So as you can see, there's an awful lot of groups coming together in order to try and develop and grow and support this emerging sector and growing sector. There are a number of useful website links for reports and approaches, such as small-scale income generation activities and corporate social responsibility, volunteering opportunities, income generation, equipment discounts, and so forth as well. So hopefully this is something which you're aware of, and if you're not, this is certainly something I would recommend you look at. There is a worksheet which has all the links, which is on the My Community website, if that's something you aren't aware of and you want to get to. But equally, you're more than welcome to have the handouts as well, if that's going to be of use to you. Okay, so another organisation out there doing great things is Sustain, which advocates food and agriculture policies and practice that enhance the health and welfare of animals and people, or people and animals, depending on your preference. They also want to improve the working and living environment, promote equity and enrich society and culture. So they've obviously got some pretty lofty ambitions there, but the Sustain website has a plethora of reports and information covering a huge variety of food-related activities, including securing investment for projects, food pricing approaches, monitoring and evaluation, and how to set up horticultural enterprises from scratch, and a whole load of others as well. So yes, by all means, do have a look at some of the things that are going on at Sustain too. I have to say, I was really impressed looking through the various websites, how much really useful, detailed information there is out there. Okay, let's move on to Plunkett then. Plunkett Foundation helps communities take control of their challenges and overcome them through cooperation. They support people to set up and run life-changing community cooperatives, enterprises that are owned and run democratically by large numbers of people in their communities. The Plunkett website has links to small food hub approaches, toolkits for food cooperatives, farmers markets, legal governance approaches, inspiring examples, and links to initiatives such as urban community shops. So once again, there's a lot of really, really good, useful information out there. Local examples, community food growers network, food assemblies. Increasingly large numbers of areas now have them. I'm based in Nottingham, and certainly I'm aware of one going in Nottingham. These are community food growers networks which are an informal network of people involved in community growing, in this instance in London. It's all about growing urban food movement, providing a means for access to sustainably sourced, locally produced, fresh and nutritious food for local communities. And generally, food assemblies are seen as being sourced from the most local source possible. That seasonality, traceability and transparency is maintained, and that products are sourced from small or medium scale producers engaged in sustainable farming or food production methods. So again, the ethical basis is coming out very loud and clear in that aspect. Let's also briefly discuss the Open Food Network. In January 2016, Open Food Network secured funding for a national rollout. Since then, food hubs, food banks, food co-ops, independent shops, markets and farmers markets, farm shops, and a wide range of food and drink producers have been joining to make an increasingly rich, diverse and effective open food network in the UK. Open Food Network is designed to make your local food project more viable, easier to run and more convenient for customers. Food hubs on the Open Food Network can choose to sell their own produce and the produce of other producers. This could be through a farm, co-op societies or box schemes that would like to include other products within their distribution and allow customers to easily choose their options and replacements. Selling through Open Food Network UK is free, and Open Food Network is a platform cooperative, so that means part of the solidarity or sharing economy of making good food as accessible as it possibly can be. The goal is to support the distribution of as much local food as possible. Okay, I'm just going to very briefly talk about community cafes. Through Locality, as I'm sure you're probably aware, we come across an awful lot of groups wanting to set up community cafes, very often with the aspiration, expectation that they are a relatively easy way to make money. However, many groups often struggle to make a viable income. In fact, from our experience, 70% commonly at their groups who are struggling to make a profit with these. It's obvious, really, I know, but I think it's really, really important to ensure if you're going to investigate community cafes, you need to think about the location. It's location, location, location in terms of the footfall. Often community cafes are set up to act as a community draw where other activities can be delivered, such as around health and well-being. So you maybe need to think about bringing who are looking for honeypot kind of venues where people will come and therefore they can then do their out engagement within that sort of setting, often very, very neutral setting as well. So ultimately you need to know your market and profit margins, but that said, there are a number of groups who are interested, are already delivering community cafes and where they work really, really well. But as I say, similarly, there are examples of crowdfunder sites showing examples of community cafe fundraising, which again is really crucial and important, as well as the fact that community cafes and catering, there are other examples. There's a Scotland-based one, but most of the assumptions are the same as for the rest of the UK, and also include good practice guides, fact sheets, and so forth. The profit as much as you can on certain products, such as jacket potatoes, you should be looking for a markup of 60, 70, even possibly 80% on those. So, you know, obviously it's key to make sure you have the right kind of products. So I'm now going to hand over to who's going to give you a much more in-depth kind of overview of this whole local food agenda. There'll be another poll coming up, and at that point, as part of the presentation from Nick, there will be opportunities for questions. So as I say, if you do have any questions that you want to raise, do please start putting them in the box, and I will then read those out and we can see whether they've fully answered the questions. So Nick, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be talking to you all. And it's a little bit spooky saying that there's quite a lot of people on the attendee list who I know, and I can't actually talk to you because you can't talk to me. Well, I can talk to you, but you can't talk back. But yeah, really good to be here. If you do have any questions, please do stick them up on the question list there, because it is what I'm hoping to do this morning is to respond to your questions more than make a presentation. I think it would be a lot more interesting for you all if we could actually do as much as we can on a webinar, an interactive process here. So what I'm going to do is run through a few slides. Hopefully you can see my screen now. And what we're going to do is to answer your questions as we go along. I'm going to make a presentation. Please do stick your questions up on the questions box there. And as Mick said, what I'm hoping to do is to cover three main areas today, and we're talking about community supported agriculture and food production generally. I'm also going to be talking about food distribution, which I can see from the poll is something that that a lot of you are very interested in, and I'm also going to be talking about the Open Food Network. Now I'm having exactly the same problem that Mick had, and my slides are not scrolling through as they should. So Mick, if you've got any clues as to how I get my slides to scroll, I'd be very much appreciate it. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, good. So yeah, thank you, Mick. I've got it now. Three sections. Yeah, food production, food distribution, and the Open Food Network. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Weir. I am based in Stroud in Gloucestershire. I'm a part-time grower on an allotment-based CSA, and I helped to set up Stroud Community Agriculture about 16, 17 years ago now. Stroud Community Agriculture is now a 50-acre farm, employing 3 full-time farmers and growing fruit and veg for about 300 supporter families. We also produce beef and pork and lamb for those families as well. And surpluses are sold through Stroudco Food Hub. Then about 13 years ago, we started Stroudco Food Hub here in Stroud, and I'll talk more about that under food distribution, but basically that's like an online farmers market. I'll talk a bit about how that works. And then for the last 4 years, I've been involved in bringing the Open Food Network to the UK, and as Mick said earlier, OFN is an open source, not-for-profit online system to allow food producers to sell direct to the public and to sell through food hubs and farmers markets and local shops and so on. So I'll be spending a bit of time talking about that. So that's my background. That's the aim of the presentation this morning. I'm going to start off by giving you a brief definition of CSA. That is one of the definitions. It's been defined in lots of different ways, but the basic premise is that we're trying to bring the producers closer to the eaters and to make a more fair way of growing food. And there's lots of different models of CSA. There's all sorts of decisions that need to be made when you're setting up CSAs. It'd be interesting to have your questions on this, but for those of you who are not yet starting a CSA, one of the big questions, first of all, is do you start with an existing farm that wants to then involve the community, or are you starting with a community that's then going out to look for land and look for farmers? Both work, and both I've been involved in projects in the UK that have both taken either or both of those approaches and worked very successfully for pieces of land and somebody to help grow it, to grow the food. What we did in Stroud is we started with a walled garden, which was just 3/4 of an acre, and we had a farmer in our group who was willing to do a bit of work on a trust basis. He didn't get paid at all for his first season of growing. We did make up for that later, but in the early days he just did it for the love of it. And then gradually we grew and we moved to several bigger sites, and as I say, we're now up to 50 acres with Stroud Community Agriculture. The quality of the land is really important. Obviously the aspect in terms of getting enough sunlight and ideally being south or southwest facing, and also the soil quality, and there are lots of organisations who do soil analysis and help you to decide whether that is good land to grow whatever it is you're looking to grow on that land. And then the ownership of that land. There's a big decision about whether you own the land or rent it. One of the downsides of renting is that you have no security of tenure, so you might put 5 or 10 years of work into building the fertility on a piece of land and getting to know the piece of land and actually building a relationship with that land, and then lose it if the landowner decides they don't want to renew the lease. But the downside of buying is that is a huge commitment, and buying land is expensive, and there's a huge commitment involved there. So of course there is a bit of a toss-up there. And what we did in Stroud, and what we're still doing with Stroud Community Agriculture, is we are renting the land on a farm business tenancy, and that used to be an annually renewable agreement. It's now up to a 5-year agreement to give us a bit more security of tenure. And we have, in the last year, the Biodynamic Land Trust has bought on our behalf another 40 acres of land, which is adjoining one of our sites in Stroud, and that is a community land trust, a community farm land trust, which means that land is secured in perpetuity for the community to grow food, which gives us a huge amount more security and means that we can make very long-term plans on that piece of land. But it did take us 15, 17 years to actually build up to actually owning that land. Governance, another big decision. We set up Stroud Community Agriculture as an IPS because at the time there was no such thing as a CIC. Since then, quite a lot of the CSAs I've worked with have been community interest companies. But apart from the legal stuff around governance, there is a whole decision about who is going to lead this project. What we've done in Stroud is we've set up a core group, which is an elected body made up of some of the farmers and some of the community, and that rotates every year. A third of that group resigns and is replaced by new people from the farm team and the community. And that core group is there to support the farmers and to take on the planning and the strategic thinking around the farm. Obviously, the farmers have day-to-day responsibility for growing decisions, but the core group help with supporting that team and doing things like marketing and building the community and arranging events and all that sort of thing. So yes, in terms of building the community, we did in the early days an awful lot of public meetings. So as well as having initially weekly meetings of the core group and then fortnightly, then out down to monthly meetings of the core group, there were what we call public meetings where we invited the whole community and anybody who was interested in the project to come along and see what we were doing. Some of those meetings were on the land, some of them were evening meetings in a cafe, and we would give them a brief report on where we were up to and ask for ideas on the future of the project. We did things like community cafes where we got people sitting around tables. Sometimes a bring and share food where people would bring food that was produce from the farm, and they'd share that food. We'd have paper tablecloths on the tables, and we'd have a member of the core group on each of the tables, and we would host a discussion around some of the key points, the key decisions that the core group were planning to take, like, do we extend the membership over 100 families? That was a big decision. How tightly should we limit the size of the community? Should we go for funding for new polytunnels? All that sort of thing. And those big decisions, the core group member who was sitting on the table hosting that table would lead a conversation around those points. So it would be a chat where people could sort of socialize over a meal, but every now and again another decision will be dropped into the conversation. And there were loads of pens on the table. So the point about the paper tablecloths is that people were encouraged to scribble things on the tablecloths during the meeting. So it was a way of taking notes. At the end of the meeting, somebody took these dirty tablecloths away and typed them up, and we ended up with information really for the core group. It wasn't really a decision-making forum, but it was a way of getting information about what was important to the community, and that then informed the community group. We also did more sort of formal decision-making in large groups where we'd have a huge board with concentric circles drawn on it, and we would ask people we'd give people 2 or 3 counters each, and we'd ask them to move the counters towards the center of the circle if they agreed with whatever the decision was, and move the counters out if they didn't agree with it. And that was just a way. There's a fuller write-up in one of the documents at the end of the webinar. I'll give you a link to a document that's got all of this in there, but there are decision-making processes you can do with large groups of people, and it does give people a sense of ownership of their project. It's their farm, and they're starting to make decisions about how it runs. And then a load of stuff around distribution and share planning. Sorry, I'm dashing through this in a lot of detail, but if you do have questions, please do put a question up on the poll on the question bar that you've got on your screens, and we will have a slot for questions in a minute. But just hammering through these slides to try and make up for lost time. Distribution and share planning. How are you going to get the produce from the farm to the shoppers? What we've done in Stroud is our farm is split, so we've got two 25-acre sites and then this new 40-acre site, and each of those has a pickup point, and that's a shed with a lockable door. The lock is a padlock with a combination number, so members can let themselves in there, and each shed has got a blackboard in there that tells people what one share is. So some people pay for a full share, some pay for a half share, some pay for 2 shares. But the farmer writes up each week what one share is. So it might be 500 grams of potatoes, 250 grams of carrots, and so on. And then there are boxes of produce. So the farmers harvest the produce. The members then come in and weigh out their produce. if there's something in the shed that they don't like, they're encouraged to weigh it out anyway and then put it in the gift box, and the gift box is then available for anybody who wants to take anything that's in the gift box. So rather than just not taking something that you don't fancy that's in the share, weigh it out, put it in the gift box, and then somebody else can take it. We also, from the farm, have some pick-your-own options. So at the moment, there's some pick-your-own flowers that's available. Quite often, spinach is on a pick-your-own basis, so people can pick as much as they like. And again, that gives people a sense of this being their farm, and they can harvest their own produce. One of the problems with our farms is that Stroud is quite hilly, and the farms are both quite high up, and people like me don't want to cycle up there every week to get our veg. So the lazy buggers like us have a drop-off point in town. And there's drop-off points in 2 or 3 towns around Stroud where the farmers weigh out the produce. Obviously, you don't get any of the pick-your-own options, but you do get your produce taken to a central drop-off point. And that, again, makes it easier for either lazy people or people with mobility issues to get produce from the farm. And sometimes drop-off points can be people's houses. Some people might be willing to receive, 10 shares at their house, and then their neighbours pick up from their homes. And then home delivery, which is a risky one because it's expensive, but some CSAs do a home delivery service. It is incredibly time-consuming and costly, so you do need to think long and hard about that. And one of the options that has happened in Stroud is, since we've had Stroud Co. Food Hub, which I'll talk about in a minute in terms of distribution, there is now an option for people who want it delivered to their home to order the produce through the Food Hub online and then have it delivered to your home. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Oh, marketing. Though masses of stuff around marketing. I'm not going to have anything like time to cover all this, but we have done a lot of newspaper articles. The big thing about newspapers is never pay for advertising, because nobody reads newspaper adverts. What you need to do is to get a newsworthy story, and there's loads of angles on community food growing. There's cute kids naming the lambs and all that sort of thing. There's stories from the farmer about what it's like growing food. There's all sorts of seasonal stuff you can do, but make it newsworthy, get a picture of it, and try and get the newspaper to put it in as a news story. There's 2 benefits of that. One is that people read the news in newspapers, they don't read the ads, and the other is that it's free. You don't have to pay for it. So it's a much more effective way of getting your news out there. And of course, your best way of marketing is word of mouth. So get the people who are already involved in the project to talk to their friends about it. We did a brief experiment with Introduce a Friend, where anybody who introduces a new member gets some kind of bonus. Maybe they get a free veg share for a week, or they and the new member get a free veg share. But it encouraged people to get their friends involved. That's by far, in my experience, by far the easiest way of getting new members. And conflict resolution. One of the big things I've found across a lot of the CSAs I've worked with is that a group comes together with a huge amount of passion and excitement about the idea of CSA, and they have a lot in common. But they make assumptions. They assume that everybody has exactly the same vision that they have, and as the project evolves, it becomes clear as you get into the huge amount of nitty-gritty work that's involved that there are big differences, and that everybody thought they had an agreement, but actually there is a significant but not very visible detail that when you get to that detail, it does cause an issue. And because people are so passionate about it, quite often that conflict can be quite heated. And my encouragement would be to not avoid that conflict, but to deal with it and to encourage the building of consensus. I'm really excited about the idea of consensus. And again, there's a load of detail in the handouts that you'll get at the end. But the idea of consensus is that you listen to the minority, you find out why people are concerned about whatever the decision is, that you try not to veto, you try not to block any decision, and you try to find a solution that everyone can live with. It might not necessarily be everyone's ideal solution, but you're aiming to find a solution that everyone can live with. And if, in my experience, if you can work through conflict, you end up with a much, much stronger group and a much more committed group than you do if you bury the conflict. I've seen groups try and avoid conflict, and it ends up coming up and biting them in the arse in the end and causing all sorts of problems. So yeah, go through it. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And finance, again, huge amount of detail in terms of cash flow forecasts and business plans in the handouts that you'll get at the end. We in Stroud have a system where people pay a membership fee, which gives them voting rights in the co-op and gives them an ownership of the farm. They'll become a member of the IPS, and then on top of that, they pay for their veg shares, which is £35 per month now. Sorry, I'm just being given some background information by the administrator here. It's £44 a month. It's gone up, and that gives them a single veg share. So for £46 a month, they get their IPS membership and a veg share, which covers a weekly veg share. So they're paying about £11 a week for their veg share. And then on top of that, people will then pay for meat, because we had a big issue in the early days about meat eaters not wanting to be part of the project. So we did end up separating the meat out separately from the veg share. But some of the examples I can give you do include both meat and veg CSAs. So we've got a little bit to pause for questions, and I'm going to ask Mick to chip in and give me a summary of the questions that might have come up. And while Mick does that, I'm just going to give you a few quick examples of some of the CSAs. Oh, sorry, I'll give you time to read that, and I'm going to ask Mick to chip in and give me a summary of any questions we've got.
Okay, thanks for that, Nick. So far we've had two, and again, apologies earlier on for the problems, technical issues. So the first question or point is from Rhiannon, where she says, critical factor is the initial sourcing of land. Any suggestions of good ways to find available land to rent, lease, etc.? I'll kick off very briefly with this. I mean, there are short-term lease approaches, so meanwhile space kind of is one of those where you can literally get land from people for short-term timescales if you're looking to try things. But over to you, Nick, in terms of other sort of more sort of technical ways, and then I'll go on to the next question, because there were two so far.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody's got more questions, please do stick them up there. I'd much rather answer questions than give long, boring monologues. Yes, we found our land through word of mouth. We just put the word out there that we were starting this up. We had a huge amount of interest in the early days. One of the first things we did was to call a public meeting and just knock around the idea of CSA. And we had 80 people just turn up to that meeting because they were so excited about the idea of community food growing. And there were people at that meeting who had land or knew of somebody who got land and were willing to go out and do a bit of research for us and find options. As Mick said, there are various online options for finding land. The danger of that is that you have less of a personal connection with the landowner, and the landowner is pretty crucial. We've been very lucky in Stroud that we've got landowners who are very committed to the idea of CSA, and that is important because it is a bit invasive. You do end up with a lot of people who turn up on your land. They don't necessarily know what they're doing. They're not very. One of the reasons we're doing CSA is because people don't have much of a connection with the land, and it takes people a while to become sensitive to the needs of the land. So the landowner does need to have some patience and some willingness and some commitment to the idea. So again, I would recommend word of mouth in terms of finding land, and also trying to make sure that you do have some security of tenure. There's nothing more heartbreaking than putting time and energy into building a CSA and then have the landowner suddenly pull the plug on it, and you've got to move and start all over again, and you end up moving to a site that's covered in brambles and ash trees, and you're starting to clear from scratch. Huge amount of physical work and very demoralizing. So yeah, be careful and take your time over finding the right bit of land. Mick,
I'll just add another sort of slight comment too, that one of the groups I'm supporting through Bright Ideas Fund, they've had a conversation with two of their local authorities, and in fact a plot has come up now. But the issue with this is obviously you don't just jump in there thinking, well, we'll take the first thing that's offered to us, because one of the other things they want to do is a food growing community cafe approach there, and they have to consider whether it has the right footfall, the right kind of location to get passing trade. If it doesn't, they're really going to struggle. So just because you're offered something, don't necessarily jump at it. Make sure you take the time to work out that it is right for you. Okay, and the next question, Petra is interested about legal structures and the sort of value of a kick as opposed to a community benefit society. How important is membership, particularly if looking to raise funds through community share offer? Well, I can initially start to answer that question, and then Nick can come in. If you're looking to do a community share offer, then you will need to set yourself up with a governance structure whereby you have community benefit society or similar sort of model in order to do that. That is a requirement. Yeah, Nick, over to you in terms of the benefits of between a kick and a community benefit society.
Thank you, Mick. Although you probably have got more experience than me on this, I have done both and know a little bit about the pros and cons, but you're probably making a better position to answer that than me. My interest is more in terms of what you do with your legal structure once you've got it. So, Mick, I don't know if you would rather give an answer on that than me. I could blag a little bit, but I will be blagging.
Well, you're right. It's always about form needs to follow function. Sometimes people assume a kick is a good way to go because a kick means that you're going to be enterprising and you'll make profit. Well, I think there's some hideous statistic probably made up where 75% of kicks don't actually make any surplus or profit. So there is something to be making sure that you're very clear on the type of structure you want to do. As I say, my understanding is if you want to do community share offers, then you do need to have a community benefit society approach put in place. Otherwise you won't get past the various requirements that you expected to meet as part of a share offer. So hopefully that helps. Nick, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add in. There's one other question's come in.
Okay, yeah, there's just one other point. One thing I do when people come to me with that kind of question is I point them to the Co-ops UK selector structure tool, which I think is fantastic. And that basically takes you through a whole series of questions about what are you planning to do with your organisation. And it takes you automatically to a recommendation for which kind of legal structure to go for. So yeah, go to the Co-ops UK website and find the selector structure tool. That's select a structure with hyphens between the words, and that is a really useful tool. So yeah, Mick, what's the last question?
Yep, okay, I just echo that comment. I've used it with groups before. It's a really good interactive way of working it out. Okay, the final question that has come in is it possible to build CSA in a city? I don't know if that's enough in there, Nick, for you to be able to answer that.
Yeah, I have seen CSAs built very effectively in cities, and one of the sort of models that I point to is the Cuban experience. And when in the Soviet crisis in Cuba, basically there was a huge need to grow all of the food for Cuba within the country, and there was very little in the way of imports. And they grew something like 80% of the food that was consumed in Havana was grown within the city limits, and they did some incredible things with vertical gardening and very intensive, very low chemical, so not intensive in that way, but in terms of labour-intensive forms of agriculture. And yes, with polytunnels and with inventive, creative ways of growing, it is possible to grow significant amounts of food. And what you can do is have lots of small-scale veg production happening around the city, and then use something like the Open Food Network to join together those food growing projects, so they can collaborate and offer a combined distribution system. But I'll come on to more of that under the Open Food Network later. So Mick, I'm very aware of time and wanting to skim through 2 more sections. So is it okay if we move on at this point?
Yes, sorry, there is one other question's come in. Well,
Yeah.
I'll just deal with them really quickly. And thank you to Sparkle for that question you raised earlier on. Kindling Trust in Greater Manchester are a good example of urban growing. So Petra, that's providing an example of what this is all about, of sharing information. So yes, hopefully people can think about that as an example.
Yeah, Kindling's
Nick,
a really good. Thank you. Yeah, Kindling's a really good example to look at. Let's go on to distribution. So I think we might have another poll coming up. What I'm interested in is what are you interested in terms of options for food distribution? I've listed some ideas there: farmers markets, community shops, food co-ops, food hubs, and food banks. And I think Mickey's going to put up a poll for that. But I'm just going to press on. There you go. There's the poll. So farmers markets, very effective way of connecting with producers, incredibly good atmosphere. I'm sure you've all got the experience of having shopped at a farmer's market. One of the downsides of it is that there is a cost involved. Here in Stroud, it costs £45 each week to have a stall at the farmer's market. So there is quite a big commitment there, which rules out a lot of the small-scale producers. And if you've got perishable produce, you may well end up taking stuff to market and ending up taking home compost. You know, you've taken on a whole load of spinach and nobody's bought it, and it's wilted and it's not fit for sale. So there are some risks to markets, but you know, when they work well, they are a great way of connecting with people and making and building community. Community shops. We have had quite a lot of experience of those with the Open Food Network. Again, communities taking responsibility for a local shop, or maybe it being still privately owned and the community supporting it as a private business. One of the issues with community shops is shelf space and storage space, and not being able to have a very wide range. So again, something the Open Food Network can help with is to have an online shop that supports the community shop. And obviously online, there's no limit to your product range. And the other benefit of community shops is that you can put perishable produce up there. You can offer vegetables online. The produce is then ordered online and it's delivered to the shop to order. So the farmer only produces exactly what is needed to meet that demand, and you end up with much fresher produce, and you don't end up taking up shelf space. Food co-ops, again, the idea here is you buy in from a wholesaler, you buy in bulk, so you're buying 25 kilo sacks of rice and then you're reweighing it and dividing it up to share amongst the members. Huge cost savings, and again, giving you access to healthy food at low prices. And food hubs, we'll talk more about that under the Open Food Network, but the idea there is a network of producers. So here in Stroud, we've got 85 different local food producers within a 15-mile radius using the Open Food Network as an online shop front. And we use a church hall on a Saturday morning for the producers to deliver their produce to the hall. It's then sorted into boxes the shoppers pick up from the church, or we do have a home delivery service delivering within a 3-mile radius of Stroud. Food hubs are a great way of involving really small-scale producers. So, because the Open Food Network has a stock limit, you can an allotment holder can sell surplus veg through the food hub. And before you shout, it is legal to sell surplus from allotments, as long as it's surpluses and not set up primarily for sale. But an allotment holder can sell their surpluses from their allotment, and that could be sold through the food hub. So if they've got sort of 3 kilos of beans to sell, once those 3 kilos have been ordered, they automatically come offline. And it's a way of people building up small-scale veg production, which is what I'm quite passionate about, is trying to revitalize local food economies and having a large number of small-scale producers close to where the people who are eating that produce are living. And so you can end up with a growing community of people who initially are growing food for fun, but actually end up making a small amount of money and then eventually a living out of growing food. Okay, let's move on. pros and cons. I've done a little bit of that already. Setting up. Again, a lot of what I said about setting up food growing projects is true in terms of thinking about what kind of model you want, starting with a public meeting of some kind to gauge interest, and not just to gauge interest but to get ownership, because if you end up setting up something and then promoting it to people, it's your idea which you're selling to somebody. If you have a public meeting and you engage with people and find out what they want, they are in at the beginning, and the bigger that group can be, the larger sense of ownership there is, and the more diverse that sense of ownership is, and you've then got a very rich seam of people who can then bring in new members because they're friends of somebody who set this thing up. Finding producers, again, what we found was that was quite a big issue for us, that there weren't 85 local food producers around Stroud when we set up. We had to go out there and create some of that. But having said that, there were, you know, I can't remember how many there were, but there was a good network of people who did get involved in when we set up the Stroudco Food Hub, and they were committed to this idea of building the business and getting it off the ground. One of the problems with starting a food hub is that you end up with a bit of a chicken and egg situation, that you've got only a small amount of produce, so it makes it less attractive to the shoppers, so you don't get very many shoppers, and if you haven't got very many shoppers, then the order size is quite low, which means that it's not very attractive to the producers. So what you need is a committed band of producers who are willing to stick with it while the orders are low. You need a committed band of buyers who are willing to shop with the food hub, even though the range is very limited, and as it grows it becomes more attractive to both the producers and the shoppers, and it ends up having an increasingly vital presence and become more and more attractive to both parties. Building community, again, very similar to what I talked about under food growing. Marketing, similar but even more exciting in terms of the stories you can tell in the newspaper. So we've had a weekly column in one of our local papers for the last 10 years, and we've managed to fill the column every week for the last 10 years with interesting stories about new producers coming online, loads of sort of, you know, cute stories about, you know, teenage producers making cakes, and you know, vegetable growers who are, you know, growing veg at school and selling, you know, from school gardens, school gardening clubs into Stroudco. Links between producers make really good marketing stories. So we've got a brewery in Stroud that was paying to get rid of its spent malt grain, and now, because we have a pig farmer and a brewer on Stroudco, the pig farmer picks up the spent grain from the brewery, feeds it to the pigs, and then we get happy pigs, we get happy shoppers, and the brewery saves money. So those all make really good marketing stories. Distribution, again, we have got people collecting from the church, we have got pickup points, we have a shed in the church grounds where people can collect late, because one of the aims of the food hub is to keep the overheads as low as possible, so we don't have a staff presence there apart from on the food drop on a Saturday morning. So if people want to pick up later in the week, we do have a shed with a fridge and a freezer in it and a combination lock on the shed, so people let themselves in and they can collect later from the shed. We also have cafes and pubs which are pickup points, and the benefit for them is that people go to pick up their pre-ordered box, and when they're in the pub or the cafe picking up their box, they'll buy a pint or they'll buy a coffee, and it will increase footfall to the cafe or the pub. And home delivery, again, beware of that, it is expensive. We used to have a 5-mile radius around Stroud, but it was too expensive, so we've now restricted it to a 3-mile radius. And we do need to make sure that we cover our costs. Supermarkets are still making losses from their home delivery service, and they're making huge losses, and they're doing it to build market share, but obviously we don't have the benefit of that profit to throw at food distribution, so we do end up charging quite a lot for home delivery just to cover our costs. Governance, very, very similar to what we've already talked about. Except that with the food hub we have a slightly different governance structure where we have an equal number of producers and shoppers on our management group, and again the management group rotates every year, but we wanted to make sure that producers and shoppers jointly manage the running of our business. So we've got quite a complicated governance structure that allows different voting structures depending on how many producers and how many shoppers are involved in a particular decision. And finance, you will at the end get some. I've got some detailed cash flow forecasts that I can show you on Stroudco, but basically we were grant dependent for we hoped for the first 3 years. It ended up being the first 10 years of Stroudco. It took a long time for us to get financially self-sufficient, but that is partly because we have a thriving farmers market here. We have a twice-weekly farmers market in Stroud. We also have 3 CSA projects around Stroud, so it probably wasn't the best of places to start a new food distribution project. Other people have copied the Stroudco model and have been self-sufficient within a couple of years, so it is possible to get a food hub up and off the ground as long as you're not competing with thriving farmers markets and CSA projects in the same town. The aim is to cooperate with the farmers market. That's what we wanted to do when we first set up. We wanted to build the food hub as part of the farmers market, but because the farmers market was not into cooperation, we ended up having to do it separately. But there are some very effective open food network food hubs which are linked to a farmers market as a click and collect service. So that was a whistle-stop tour through no, it wasn't, I've not finished, community food co-ops, lots of different ones, yeah, run by I'll just stick these up for you to quickly read. I think I've probably covered most of those points. And there are quite a few different models of food co-ops, and I'm going to quickly skim through those. And I'm just going to again ask, while I'm doing that, if Mick can say if we've got any more questions.
Yeah, we don't at the moment, so by all means, if people have got any, please get typing now. Thank you.
And while you're typing, I'm just going to flick up some examples here of some of the food co-ops that are out there. Mick mentioned earlier Sustain. Sustain have a fantastic database of food co-ops and buying groups and food hubs. Please do have a look at their website, but I'm just taking a selection here for this presentation. Market stalls. As I said earlier, Open Food Network works incredibly well with market stalls because what you can do is put everything that's available on the market stall up online. You can also put other produce from other producers up on the same shop front so that people can order online and the produce is then delivered to the stall ready harvested and harvested to order. So basically everything that's delivered has been prepaid for, so it makes it a lot more secure for the producer. And if it's a farmers market, what's happening with the Open Food Network is the producers who are coming to the market bring produce that's been pre-ordered. They then have a traditional market on the day. They then are going home with an empty van or a half-empty van. What they can do is they can take some of the pre-ordered boxes back to their farms, and they can be a pickup point. So you end up with pickup points all around the market, and it extends the geographical area of the market because people who are in the villages and towns around where the farmers come from can have a pre-ordered box that's come from the market, and it will be at the farm in their locality. And the farmer obviously charges a little bit to offer that service, so he makes a little bit of extra income to be a pickup point. And the shoppers get the benefit of being able to order everything that's available at the market, but pick it up from a local point. Bag schemes, very effective in Wales. Again, buying from a wholesaler and then as you can see from the picture there, sorting it into bags for the shoppers, and a very good way of making affordable veg, available to people in rural areas. Mobile stores. There's a great project called Charmouth Dragon down in Axminster, using the Open Food Network to encourage people to order online. So this van goes around to local villages and drops off orders and is there for people to come into the shop and buy. But one of the problems is the van is only in that village for a couple of hours, whereas if they can have an online presence using the Open Food Network, people can pre-order. They don't need to be there when the van gets there, because the van has drop-off points in each of the villages, and then the pre-ordered, prepaid for boxes are dropped off at the pickup points. And the van also can pick up from the farms, so the farmers who are supplying that can use the Open Food Network to offer their produce to the van, and the van can then pick up the produce as it's doing its rounds. And another market based in Reading. And shops. I think I've mentioned already about how community shops can use the Open Food Network system. And food chain. Again, I'm not going to have time to run through all of these in a lot of detail, but please, I'm going to put my contact details in. Please more on any of these projects, or if you want to discuss that's already so. Stop.
Sorry, Nick, you seem to be cutting out a little bit there at the moment. Nick, what just maybe while you're just readjusting, a few other questions have come in, or comments anyway, as well as questions, so I'll just go through those quickly. One initial comment is about local food safety certificates in terms of packing areas, drop-off points, consideration for budgeting, fridges for produce, separation of meat from veg, etc. So yes, there's sort of a question there about food safety certificates.
Food work within found do down, do contact early on in the process and talk to them about what you're planning to do.
Sorry, Nick. We seem to have a problem understanding you again. It's sort of cutting up a little bit. So if you want to try that again, sorry. Okay, while Nick's doing that, I'll just go through some of the other comments, and it's good that people are sharing information. This one is for anyone dialing in from Wales, the new Typhu, funny, sorry if I've said that totally wrong, project pronounced Tivi Vinny, via Federation of City Farms and Community Gardens has started to provide enterprise support, and the Community Land Advisory Service, CLAS, can help with securing land, and that's from Marcus from that organisation, so hopefully that's of use to some people.
Thank you, Mick. Can I just check how my sound quality is? Am I any clearer now?
Much better, much better.
Okay.
I'll just carry on reading through some of these other sort of comments which are covered in the meantime, then Nick, and we can move on. Okay, this one is someone interested to hear more about the different governance options, KICS, IPS, etc., the pros and cons. Thanks. You might be a bit of a tall ask with that one, but in the timescales. But yeah, Nick, if there's sort of common approaches, particularly linked to this market.
Again, no common approaches. Everybody does it differently. The big thing, and there's no way we can cover this today, the big thing is to go through the site to structures tool. Co-ops UK have a huge amount of experience, and they've developed this really good tool that will take you through the pros and cons of the different models. So that's very much my recommendation. And just going back to some of the earlier points, there was the question about food safety. I'm sorry you couldn't hear me earlier, but I was recommending that you do talk to your local council. They are there to support you and encourage you in getting started. They might come and inspect to check that your premises are suitable, but the big thing around food safety is that it's the producers. I mean, okay, you are legally responsible for the food during the time that you're handling it, but the producers are liable up to the point of delivery. So the main onus lies on them in terms of trading standards, and each of your producers, I would recommend that they should have a conversation with the local council, and again just register themselves as a food business. It is a relatively straightforward process, particularly if you're growing veg. It's a very, very simple process. It's just being put on the database. It takes 2 or 3 minutes. But if you're producing meat, or particularly cutting and butchering meat, then it is a much tighter process, and there will be a huge number of restrictions and regulations, and you will need to go through quite a process with the local council to do that.
Okay.
Were there any?
Another question's come in. Any examples of CSA connected with community composting? I mean, where veg box goes to households and organic waste goes to the farmers. I think you mentioned slightly about pigs earlier on.
Yeah, I mentioned an example where we're taking food waste from a brewery and feeding that to the pigs. I don't know of any project, and I'm sure there are bound to be projects out there that are CSAs that also do community composting. And I know of several good community composting projects, but I don't know any that are linked. But it makes perfect sense to combine the two, so that people are coming up to the farm to pick up their veg, they can bring their food waste. One of the big issues that we came across was that we wanted to get household sort of waste food, particularly cooked food, and feed it to our pigs, but there are again restrictions and regulations around that, and we haven't been allowed to do that, so we can't feed it to pigs, but we could do composting. One of the issues around composting is the quality of the produce that people are bringing up. We did end up on some of the community composting projects I've been involved in with people bringing, plastic bags full of vegetable peelings and chucking the plastic bag in with the peelings rather than emptying it out. So you do have to be a little bit careful about how you manage that. But I'm sorry to answer the question. I don't know of any combined projects, but I'm sure there are some out there. Any other questions, Mick?
Okay. Yep, just another one. If you're a one-man band or one-woman band, how long do you think you should allow for marketing each week, including writing, social media, emails, and so forth? And that's from Wendy.
Oh, how long's a bit of string? I could spend my whole week marketing Stroco Food Hub, but I write these articles, which we do once a week, and now that I've been doing it for quite a few years, I'm getting better at it. And you can obviously recycle material that you used a year or two ago, and people don't notice. But wow, really difficult. In the early days, it will be a lot more time-consuming, and it will get easier as the project goes on. I would allow, I don't know, this is a complete stab in the dark, 3 or 4 hours a week in the early days, and hope that will go down to an hour a week as you get more established. But that will depend hugely on your ambitions and your scale and how many people can help out. Because, as I said earlier, the marketing is much better done on a word-of-mouth basis. So getting other people to talk to their friends about it, rather than doing lots of work with leaflets and newspaper articles and so on. And I'm just very conscious of time, Mick. I wanted to do a quick run through. Is that okay?
I think we're good to go, so carry on.
Yeah, great, good. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look at the Open Food Network. It's a way of producers using the open food system, selling direct, both to shoppers and buyers. So some people are using the Open Food Network to sell to households, some are using it to sell to hospitals and schools and so on. And it does allow the option for public procurement. And the way it does it is either direct from the producers or selling through markets and selling through food hubs and shops, and as I mentioned earlier, the public procurement. And so it's a way of making it as simple as possible for producers to get their produce to market and to cross-sell each other's products. So a producer can set up their own shop front and they can sell not only their produce but from neighbouring producers through their own shop front. And I'm going to give you a really quick look. I'm very sorry that we're running out on time, but I would like to talk to you more about the Open Food Network. Here's the Stroco shop front. Let me just get that out of the way a little bit. where you have an order cycle that's closing, the current order cycle closing on Saturday. You have a message at the top there about how the Food Hub runs. Regular e-commerce stuff about filtering the produce by type of produce or by various properties, by organic, biodynamic, local, and so on. The producers are encouraged to put up a picture of their produce and then a description. Let's go down here a little bit. I'm trying to find something that isn't from a wholesaler. Because it's the hungry gap at the moment, we end up with a lot of produce from a veg wholesaler. But here we can get a bit of detail on the produce. Wonderful little product here, grown in coffee grounds, collected from local cafes. And if you want to know more about the producer, then you can click on that, and you can contact the producer, have a look at their website, and so on. So that's a very quick look at the front end. The back end is so once you become once you set up your own shop front, you then get access to the back end. You can look at. I'm responsible for various different enterprises. So I've chosen Strauco here. You can set up multiple managers so that various different people can manage the shop front. You set up shipping methods so you can decide where people collect their produce from, and you can set up as many of those as you like. And if you want to, you can allocate a cost to those. So we allocate a different cost to each of the home delivery options. And you set up different payment methods that people can use at the end of the shopping basket. So bank transfers, cash on collection, PayPal, and so on. And you can then manage the products. So the producers themselves will be managing their products. So they will, let's have a look at Adie's Farm as an example producer. They will be putting up the price of their products. This particular producer is selling on demand, which means they're not setting a limit to their stock. But if you had a limited amount of produce, you can put a stock level in there, and the producer will be able to manage their products. The producer can also give permission to the shopfront manager to manage their products on their behalf. And then the producer, sorry, the shopfront manager will have an order cycle. So if we have a quick look at one of the Strauco order cycles, we'll be able to see the opening date. So an order cycle is a period during which a shopper can place an order for collection at a particular time. So with Strauco, we have orders closing at 7:30 on a Saturday, on a Thursday morning, ready for delivery on a Saturday. So the order cycle runs from 7:30 Thursday through to 7:30 the following Thursday. Oh dear, we don't want that. We want to go back here. Sorry about that. So the order cycle shows the times during which the order cycle is open, and the different suppliers. So we've got loads of different suppliers selling in through Strauco. If I wanted to take off a particular product, I could just uncheck it from there and it would automatically come off the shop front. And it shows the markup. So for each of our producers, we charge a different markup depending on how much work we have to do. For most of our producers, we charge a 20% markup on their prices, and that covers the running costs of the Food Hub. But for some producers, like the brewery, Stroud Brewery won't deliver to the church hall for all sorts of reasons, so we have to go to the pub, to the brewery on a Friday to pick up the produce. But that Freudian slip there means that it wasn't quite such a hardship as it sounds, because the brewery does have a bar within the brewery, so we go down there and have a quick pint and pick up their beer for them. But we charge a slightly higher markup because we have to go to the brewery to pick up the produce. So for each producer, you have the option to change the markup. And then down at the bottom here, we have the option to give some pickup details for the shoppers, so they know where to pick up their produce from. So let me just cancel that so I don't save any changes. So yes, I'd really like to take some questions about the Open Food Network, and I wonder if there are any questions come up, Mick, that I could answer.
No, none have come up at the moment. But there was a comment that I can't see Nick's screen. I personally can, but hopefully that's been sorted out now.
Okay. Yeah, I hope if Mick can see it, then everybody else can. Okay, I'm just gonna. I know we're out of time now, so I appreciate we might lose people. One thing I do want to say is that I'm really happy to take a few more questions about the Open Food Network or anything that I've talked about today. So if you do have any questions, I would like to just stick up this final slide. So let me just go page down.
Just while you're doing that, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay. A question has come in. Can an individual join the Open Food Network?
Yes. So Open Food Network is open to shoppers as well as enterprises. So you're very welcome to just set up a login. Just go to that homepage, openfoodnetwork.org.uk, and you can browse the shops that are open already, and if there is a shop local to you, then you can shop there. And if you want to register as a producer, then there's a 5-minute process. There's a registration link on the homepage, which will allow you to set up as a producer and or a shop front if you want to set up a shop front. The deal, I just want to clarify one thing that Mick said earlier. The deal is that Open Food Network is free if you're a producer, and you're very welcome to put produce up there and wait for someone to come along and sell it for you. But if you're selling produce through the Open Food Network, you get a 6-month free trial, and at the end of that we ask for £1 per month as a minimum contribution to running costs. And if you can afford to pay more, and if you feel you're getting more value from the software, we are a platform cooperative, which means that you pay according to your means and according to the value you feel you're getting from the service. So we do have some significant server hosting costs and development costs within the Open Food Network, so we do encourage people to pay whatever they feel they can afford, and the guideline is somewhere between 2 and 4% of your online sales, but that is a guideline, and if you can't afford that, then we do we only ask for £1 a month as a minimum contribution. So there's a load of useful...
Thanks for that. Yeah, sorry, there's another question now as well. It's from... That previous question was from Sparkle, this one's from Liz. Are there any insurance implications of using collection points?
Insurance implications. So most of the collection points well, certainly all the collection points that Stroudco use are businesses, so they've already got public liability insurance and so on. I guess the question is more about people using their homes as collection points. And with the CSA, we don't, as far as I understand it, we don't have any insurance for the collection point, and one of the big considerations there is what is the risk. So if somebody's picking up vegetables from somebody else's house, then there's very little food safety issue there. But if you were using somebody's house as a food hub pickup point and you were delivering chilled and frozen produce to that pickup point, then there would be issues, and there would be a need to make sure that you were conforming to food safety regulations. And depending on your ethics around insurance, you may well want to consider insurance. My personal feeling about insurance is that it's a complete scam, and that I would avoid paying anything to insurance companies at all if I could avoid it. But having said that, there is a need in certain circumstances to have public liability insurance and to make sure that you are conforming to all the regulations. So I hope that answers that question. Any other questions, Mick? I have put up my contact details there for anybody who needs to leave the call, but I'm really happy to take more questions about Open Food Network if people have them.
There's none at the moment, so we'll give people another moment, and then we'll see where we go.
Fine. But yes, we are really keen to hear from anybody producing food. We're trying to populate the OFN map. I didn't have time to show you the map, but if you go to that homepage, openfoodnetwork.org.uk, you can have a quick look at the map there. The green tags are producers and the red tags are shops or hubs that are selling and open. As I say, to register as a producer on the Open Food Network is free and always will be free. It's a way of just making visible where people are producing food. So please do register on the map, get your flag on the map there so that other people can find you and help you to distribute your food. And if you're interested in selling through the Open Food Network, again, there's a a relatively straightforward registration process, and you would then get an online user guide. You'd get access to a community forum where you can ask for questions about the practicalities of setting up a food hub. And that's not necessarily just the software. The forum is also used for people to say, does anybody know about a good courier we could use to distribute chilled produce? So it's a general forum. And there is an OFN support team who will pick up any software queries and support anybody who needs help setting up an online shopfront. I also want to mention briefly the difference between people like Food Assembly and Farm Drop and the Open Food Network. There are several people who are producing software very similar to the Open Food Network, but OFN is the only open source software out there, and that's a really important difference between them. So Food Assembly is a closed source system. It's funded by venture capital funding. It's a private company. They charge 16% of all transactions, of which 8% goes to the Food Assembly manager, and 8%, half of the markup, goes back to Food Assembly to cover to repay the investors, basically, to cover the people who put money up to develop the software. Whereas OFN has been developed initially in Australia by a foundation called the Open Food Foundation, a charitable foundation, with philanthropic funding and volunteer time, and it is open source, which means the software is free. You can set up an instance of OFN in the UK and use it with no charge whatsoever, and the charges I mentioned earlier are only if you join the public instance of OFN in the UK. And the benefit of joining the public instance is that as the software develops and as people develop improvements and additions to the software, everyone benefits from those additions. And the other big difference between Food Assembly and Open Food Network is that Food Assembly has quite a prescriptive business model. You need to set up your business in quite a particular way to be a Food Assembly, whereas Open Food Network is designed to be as flexible as possible, so that farmers markets can use it as a click and collect, community shops can use it as an online part of an online shop front to supplement their shop. Food hubs like Stroudco can network with 85 different producers and sell through one shop front and one pickup point. Food banks can use it, food co-ops can use it to buy from wholesalers to buy in bulk and split the produce and sell sacks of rice in 1 kilo portions. And the benefit of having one system that all these different enterprises can use is that they can then cross-sell and they can then link up with each other. There's a facility within OFN to have distribution arrangements, so that if a farmer is driving past another farm on the way to market, he can set up a distribution agreement with the second farmer and pick up his produce and take that to the market and charge a small distribution fee for that. So that's another slight rant about OFN. Mick, how are we doing? Do you think we ought to close things down? Are there any final questions?
There's just a couple of final points. Is the Open Food Network ideal for small-scale outlet? Sorry, it's just suddenly disappeared. Is the Open Food Network ideal for small-scale producers just starting out? And in addition to that, and can it be used as a sole outlet for smaller producers?
Yeah, the answer is yes to both of those. So we have producers, as I said earlier, somebody who's selling from an allotment. So they are really small scale, and for most of the year they don't have any products for sale. But when they do get a surplus of beans or courgettes, or they sometimes sell flowers from the allotment, then they can just increase their stock level on the website, and then any of the local hubs that are available that are interested in selling their produce will automatically be able to put them back on their shop front. So it's a really easy way for small-scale producers to sell through other shop fronts, and it's completely viable for them to set up their own shop front, even if they're trading really small volumes. They can create an online shop front. It takes about 15 minutes to set up a shop front, and then they have a unique URL, a unique website address where they can send their shoppers to, and the shoppers can place orders. And yes, it is designed very much for small-scale producers. I think, does that answer both those questions, Mick? I'm sorry, I forgot the second question.
Yes, I think it does. Okay, I think we're sorry. There's just one final one. This is some sparkle as well. Would the trader need to register as self-employed?
No, no. Certainly, lots of the Strauco producers are not registered as self-employed. I don't. Well, I guess there are HMRC implications here because you will be making an income from it. And I'm not enough of a tax specialist to answer those questions. And the reason for my immediate no answer is that I don't I don't like any of that legislation around self-employment. I am personally self-employed, but that is not as a veg grower. Although the small income I do make from veg growing, I do declare it. I don't know. Sorry, Sparkle. I can't. I'm not able to answer that question. What I can say is that by using the Open Food Network, if you have a shop front, you will be making an income from it, and I'll leave it to your personal conscience what you do with that income.
Okay, that's pretty much it now then. Again, apologies that we've had the technical issues. Webinar is a wonderful thing and it's a beautiful thing and it works perfectly, but obviously we had our glitches today, but nevertheless we still hope that you've found a lot of this at 90 minutes really useful in terms of A, demonstrating the amount of information out there, but B, also showing that there is a really good collaboration approach between lots of organisations working together because they all see the common good and benefit in doing this sort of approach. So I guess from my perspective, I'd like to thank you for your patience. Hopefully you have found this useful. Yes, we will make sure the presentations are available to you with the links working, so you can use that as a resource. We do hope you found this useful and helpful, and obviously we wish you all the best going forward with your ventures. Nick, I don't know if there's any final words from you?
Just really to echo what you've said, Mick, I'm sorry that you can't talk back to us, but I really admire all the work that's going on out there. There's some fantastic community work going on, growing food and distributing it, and it is growing, and it's very exciting to be part of this movement. So good luck to you, and yeah, if you've got any more questions, do give me a shout. Thanks for your time.
Okay, and without further ado then we'll close this, and again, thank you for your time as well.